This is the holy gospel of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, according to Matthew. Glory to you, Lord Christ. This is Matthew chapter 15, beginning at the 21st verse. Leaving that place, Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. A Canaanite woman from that vicinity came to him, crying out, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is demon-possessed and suffering terribly." Jesus did not answer a word. So his disciples came to him and urged him, "Send her away, for she keeps crying out after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel." The woman came and knelt before him. "Lord, help me," she said. He replied, "It is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." "Oh, yes, it is, Lord," she said. "Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Then Jesus said to her, "Woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted." And her daughter was healed at that moment. This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Christ. In the name of God, of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Please be seated. Good morning. Good to see you. So I think we are supposed to be sure to check in on Facebook and tell people that we're here. Is that right? Yes? And the prayer, chalk it up a prayer board is empty, ready to receive your prayer requests when you do that. The question for us this morning, I think, is what keeps you from seeking a deeper relationship with Jesus? What are the obstacles that keep you from really wanting to press in and to see Jesus work in your life? Is it maybe because you're busy? I get really busy. Is it maybe because you feel guilty? You feel guilty about things you've done, decisions you've made? That'll work on me. Is it maybe because you're afraid of what you feel like if you did hear Jesus speak, that what it was that he would say to you? That can be. Or is it maybe because you prayed before and really sought him before and you got nothing? Silence. And then you just kind of figure, well, maybe he's busy with other people, or his inbox is flooded and he doesn't have time for me. Well, there are lots of obstacles that get in our way of trying to press into our relationship with Jesus. And so then, when we see in the Gospels, we see Jesus point to somebody and to say, now that person there has great faith. They're worth listening to and kind of looking into what's going on in this story. And so we run across one of those people today, a woman who comes and asks him for the healing of his daughter. And he says that she has great faith. But it is a difficult encounter. Jesus says some things that we don't expect for him to say. And so we got to kind of tease this apart to try to figure out what is it that Jesus is offering us and what is it that he's calling us to be or to do. So if I were to kind of reset the context for us here, Jesus is going with his disciples up to the region of Tyre and Sidon. That's a Gentile area. Jews would not in general have gone there unless they absolutely had to, and they would go covering their eyes and holding their noses. And Jesus is going there with his disciples specifically because he's getting ready to go to Jerusalem, where he knows what's going to happen in Jerusalem. And so he wants to spend time with his disciples, getting them ready for what's going to come. So this is like a crash course. This is a retreat. Clergy oftentimes go on retreat with their bishop. Here the church staff goes on retreat in order to be able to kind of talk together and pray together about what's important. The vestry here goes on retreat in order to be able to kind of get our heads together about the challenges and things that are out there waiting for us. So to go on retreat means to be able to ask the question, so what is it that we need to do? What's the game plan for us as we go forward? And so the disciples are wanting to spend this quality time with Jesus away from the crowds. And so they go up to this Gentile area. They probably haven't been in a Gentile area very much, a little bit, but not very much. And they kind of have the same reaction of kind of wanting to kind of cover their eyes and hold their noses because of all of these stinking Gentiles that are around, right? All right? But they got their job to do, and it buys them some time. And so they go up to this area. And as they're kind of walking along, or they're in this place, and it says, a Canaanite woman from that vicinity came to him, crying out, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is demon-possessed and suffering terribly." And Jesus did not answer a word. So, we got a bunch of stuff in this passage that we need to unpack. One is that obviously this person is coming to Jesus, and she's a woman. And from other Bible passages that we've looked at, if you've heard those particular sermons or read those passages, you know that women and men didn't talk. It was just inappropriate. It was scandalous for a woman to talk to a man, to approach a man, and certainly not for a man to approach a woman. And yet this woman comes, and she's got tremendous energy behind her. There are almost no other examples of women coming to Jesus and asking for something. It's always men. And so now we've got this woman who's coming, and not only is she coming against all social convention, is she coming to Jesus to ask for what she wants, but it's not just Jesus. There are these 12 other guys who are standing there. It's like a wall of Rottweilers who are there. And yet she doesn't even seem to notice. She's going to take them all on. How come? Because she's got this daughter who is demon-possessed, who is tormented, who is not doing well. She's not going to qualify for her SATs. And so she needs some intervention. She needs some help. And because she is so moved, so desperate, she's willing to kind of fly in the face of what it means to take on all of these guys to try to find help for this daughter. And so she is determined. But it's not just the fact that she's a woman. She is a Canaanite woman. She's a Canaanite woman. So what's that mean? Well, so if you go back in your history, you'll remember that as the children of Israel were going into the promised land, they were supposed to go and take the land, right? And they were supposed to obliterate the people who were there. And who was there? The Canaanites, right? And so it was supposed to be a Holocaust for all of the Canaanites. They were supposed to destroy the nation. Well, one got away. She's here. She's the only Canaanite that's mentioned in the New Testament. She's there. And further, the name Jesus is the Aramaic pronunciation of his name that we know. But if you were to pronounce it in Hebrew, that name is Joshua. Joshua. She's coming to Joshua, the one who would have obliterated her lineage. She's coming to him, calling him Lord, Son of David, to help her. Well, okay. Talk about a complicated family history. And not only that, as I said, she's a woman coming to do this. Where is the guy? I mean, where's her husband? I mean, she was in the position of coming and asking for help on her own. So, was this child conceived out of wedlock? Were they divorced? Was he dead? So now there's this other kind of moral thing that's going on here that we have to kind of figure out. So she is a scandalous, she is a genetically inferior and she's a woman, and she's coming, and she's just blurting all of this stuff out. And then she's laying this request in front of Jesus, and Jesus says what? Zippo. 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 So let me ask you this question. So when you pray, does Jesus ever just seem to say like nothing? And when Jesus says like nothing, what do you take from that? Do you take from that he didn't put his hearing aids in that morning? That somehow you didn't get the incantation quite right? That somehow you don't have the right line? What do you take from the fact that Jesus doesn't say anything? I mean, in general, for me, I don't take that the silence is filled with the love and the grace and the mercy of Jesus. That sometimes the best thing for us is silence on his part, to allow the love and the grace and the mercy to work. And so Jesus doesn't say anything, but not his disciples. Not his disciples. They got something to say. They say, who the heck does she think she is? We're supposed to be up here having our retreat, right? We're supposed to be talking about really important stuff, getting the job done, right? And this woman is distracting everything, and she's going to call a crowd over here. So Jesus, just tell her to get out of here. Go away. Let me tell you, when I come across people who are really broken and who really have, just represent the taking of time and energy, I think for a minute about how I'm going to respond. Oftentimes my first reaction isn't, this person was sent to me by God. It is, how do I guard my time and my resources? So clearly for the disciples, this person she's an obnoxious threat. She's a gadfly. Just kind of get her out of here, get her away from us. And they're representing, aren't they, this attitude that would have come from the religious leaders of their time. They would have had the sense that Gentiles, you weren't supposed to give your time to Gentiles. It would be better if they were obliterated from the face of the earth. And so Jesus finally does. When they say that about her, get rid of her, Jesus does respond. He opens his mouth. And what does he say? He says, I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. Oh, now, you remember, so that there's an echo there. He's remembering that back at the beginning for Jesus, there was a strategic plan to just start out with the Jews, just to get the message out for the Jews. But then the mission had blossomed, had grown past that. He went to Gentile territories. He healed the slave of the centurion. He did all kinds of things with Gentiles. But now Jesus is saying to these disciples of his, guys, maybe we ought to just tell her to go. Just tell her to get out of here because she's a distraction for us. We're supposed to only give our attention to the household of faith. Right, guys? Right, guys? Isn't that what we're supposed to do? We're only supposed to give our attention to the household of faith, not people who are outside of it. We're only supposed to do that, right? Isn't that the game plan? And I suspect the disciples were saying, yeah, darn right. That's exactly where because those are the cool people. Yeah. Those are the people we're supposed to focus on. And so they're saying, yeah, absolutely. But the woman will have none of it. It says, the woman answers this, what's coming out of Jesus' mouth, and she comes out and she kneels in front of him, and it says, she kneels and she says, Lord, help me. She isn't somehow thrown off by these kind of somewhat, certainly rude words, but she's not thrown off. She continues to stay in the game. Lord, help me. She appeals to him. And then Jesus says, well, All right, check. So guys, what about this? He says, so it's not right to take the children's bread and to throw it to the dogs, right? Now, that's a significant thing because that expression was common among the religious leaders. They talked about Gentiles as dogs. And the dogs that they have in mind aren't the kind of cute little fluffy and jasmine that you have that you run around in your house. These are street dogs. Now around here we don't have many street dogs, not many. But I remember if you go to a third world country or you go to a very poor area, oftentimes there are street dogs. I went to a reservation, an Indian reservation in North Dakota, and as it got cooler in the day, the street dogs would come out, and they were not just a few; there were a lot of them, and these were dogs that weren't owned by anybody. They were just kind of on their own. They would go through the trash or go wherever it was that they could find food. They were mangy because nobody took care of them. They were missing part of their hair. They stunk, and they oftentimes went around in packs. And so they were dangerous. You'd never let your kids kind of go out at night by themselves because the dogs were there. That's what he's talking about. That's what the rabbis were saying about Gentiles. So Jesus looks at these disciples of his, recognizing this woman's on her knees there, and says, so guys, right? It's not right for us to take bread from the children's table and give it to the dogs, right? Oh. There's a rule that parents, I think, try to teach their kids, good parenting anyway, which is never say anything in private about somebody else that you wouldn't say publicly to their face. Have you ever heard that rule? It's a hard one to keep, but it's a great rule. Never say anything in private about somebody that you wouldn't say publicly in front of their face. It's a great rule. It's one that we break all the time. And especially, in this day where slurs of all different kinds, where we talk about all different kinds of groups of people using words that we wouldn't use publicly, but we don't use it generally. We wouldn't be caught using it in the wrong circumstance or in front of them because of what it would say about the kind of person we are, right? So now, this expression, these Gentiles are dogs, is probably something that came off the disciples' lips. I mean, they took it from the religious leaders. They had that was going on inside of them. And Jesus knows that, the ministry of the church, what's going to happen to the church is at stake. He's going to Jerusalem. The church, what's going to happen to the church? Is it just going to stay in this kind of small, holy enclave, or is it going to grow? Is it going to burst out the doors and go and grow and heal and teach the nations? This is a critical conversation for these disciples. And so he's saying to these guys in front of this woman, all right, guys, right. It's right. It's not right for us to take your bread and to give it to the dogs. Right? Well, did they want to kind of crawl under a rock someplace or something? So they're confronted. They're dealing with their stuff. And then the woman that Jesus must be watching out on in the corner of his eye, the woman pipes up. She takes exactly what it is. She understands exactly what it is that Jesus is saying. And she says, yeah, Lord, you're exactly right. She said, it's right for the dogs to get the crumbs that fall from the master's table. It's right. So it's right for us to be able to do that. She is so filled with compassion and love for her daughter that she will take on the label of dog. I'll be a dog if that'll get me some crumbs of mercy and grace in order for my daughter to be well. I'll be a dog. I'll be a snake. I'll be whatever it is that you tell me I need to be in order to be able to get what it is that I need to get. Is it any wonder that Jesus looks at this gal, and you got to see a twinkle in his eye, just a look of just admiration for her and her courage, and being able to say, you are a woman of tremendous faith. And you guys got some work to do, right? And so it seems to me that as we get to the end of this passage, there are two lessons that come out for us. One of the lessons is it ever possible for us to be so broken, so radically beyond hope in the eyes of this world, to have done such stupid things, such destructive things, to have done, is it possible for us to have done things that are so bad that keep us from being able to have access to the love and grace and mercy and forgiveness of Jesus? And from Jesus, the word clearly is, you can't sin enough. You can't be mangy enough to not warrant the love and the grace of Jesus, and to have him wrap his arms around you, and grateful and glad that you want to have a relationship with him. You can't sin enough to make that impossible. That's the first and most basic lesson. But there's a second one, I think, and that's to the community of faith. The community of faith. What kind of a community, what kind of a kingdom is it that Jesus wants to build? Is he wanting to build it simply for people who are the right kinds of people, who look a certain way, who have accomplished certain things, who have lived according to a certain standard? Is there a litmus test for who it is that is able and can make it into the qualifications for membership of the church? The disciples had to really wrestle with that question. And it causes us in the church to really kind of look at, what are the prejudices? What are the boundaries? What are the standards that we impose on others and on ourselves in order to be able to be his people? You know, I preached this message yesterday at the 5 o'clock service. I just got to tell you this. I preached this message at the 5 o'clock service yesterday, and I came out, been a long day, tired, just kind of done, ready for supper, and went out to my car. The parking lot was almost empty, except for there was one pickup truck that was parked right next to my car. And the windows were rolled down, and there was somebody in each seat, and they were both smoking cigarettes sitting there. And I'm thinking, okay. So they're right next to my car, and so I'm ready to go home. So I get the windows open, and I say, "Hi, how you doing?" And I go to get in my car. And the guy says, "So is there an NA meeting that's meeting here on campus?" And I said, "Well, I don't know about the schedule, but we have a lot of NA meetings, Narcotics Anonymous. We have a lot of NA meetings, and so if there is one, it'll be right there in that room, right there, and so you can kind of just wait and see." And he said, "Okay." And then on the other side of him was a woman, and you could see her face was kind of worn. I mean, she'd seen a lot, and she looked over at me and she said, "I'm wearing my collar," and she said, "Can I ask you for something?" And I said, in my head, being the pure and generous person that I am, I'm thinking, I am whipped, I stink, like this, I stink, and I just want to get home and get supper. And I know she's going to ask me for money, or she's going to ask me for food or something. So I hope I didn't show it on my face. And so I looked over at her and I said, "Yeah, sure. How can I help?" And she looked at me. She put out her cigarette. She looked at me and she said, "Can I have your blessing?" Yeah, I can do that. And so I was just going to pray for her there in the car. She opens the truck door and gets out on the other side. So I go around the truck to meet with her, and she extends her hands. And so I take her hands, I say, "What's your name?" Her name's Angela. And I just say a prayer of blessing for her, that she would see, the really bright and beautiful daughter of God that she was. And we prayed, and she said thank you, and then she just gave me this big hug. And then got in her car and on with the meeting and the rest of her life. We are filled with people who want to know that Jesus loves them. And the question is, what do they experience when they come to us? Do they experience our impatience, our judgment, or do they experience a knowledge of the grace and the love of God? And have we experienced that sense of grace and love of God that allows our hearts to melt when we see somebody who needs that same message? It's a great challenge for us. What kinds of people are we? And what kinds of people is Jesus calling us to be? Amen.